37.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be my last amendment, so I'll just speak to it if I may. As I pointed out, this amendment would add edibles. It would essentially edibles and concentrates to the legalized framework of cannabis with the passage of this bill on July 1, 2018, if in fact that's the date that it's proclaimed. It would add, it would allow the legalized selling and purchasing of solids containing cannabis, non-solids containing cannabis, cannabis solid concentrates, and cannabis non-solid concentrates. The reasoning has been covered, but I'll go over it one last time. It will be impossible to displace the illicit market without legalizing edibles, concentrates, and non-smokable forms of cannabis, which represent about half the legal market in states that have legalized, like Colorado. Now, I'm talking about not just edibles, but things like creams, tinctures, sublingual tablets, patches, nasal sprays. We heard suppositories. I mean, there's many ways to ingest cannabis. And I want to pause and say, we heard a lot of evidence that people that are accessing cannabis do so not only for the THC, which is the psychoactive element, but also for the CBD, which is increasing evidence is showing is very effective as an anti-inflammatory and as an anti-spasmodic. And so particularly seniors who don't want to smoke cannabis, or non-smokers who don't want to smoke cannabis, are much more comfortable going into a store and under the guidance of people who understand the properties of the products they're selling, may want to brew tea, or they may want to use a topical cream, which has no psychoactive effects at all. These are the kinds of products that Canadians are, and people in jurisdictions that have legalized, are increasingly seeking. In some cases, more market share in those products than in smokable cannabis. As I've said, from a health perspective, it makes no sense to me to legalize smokable cannabis while continuing to prohibit edibles and other non-smokable forms. States that have legalized, like Colorado, have developed solid regulatory frameworks that are mature and have effectively mitigated the risks associated with edibles. Canada should use their regulatory frameworks as a model. Otherwise, the risks associated with edibles will go wholly unmitigated in the illicit market. The Task Force on Cannabis Legalization and Regulation's final report recommended providing regulatory oversight for cannabis edibles and concentrates for both public health and safety reasons. I think we would be wise to listen to their advice. I'm just going to quote the Honourable Anne McClellan. This is what she answered to my question of whether we should include edibles in this legislation. If your question is in line with whether edibles should be addressed in federal legislation, absolutely. Should edibles be provided to the market? Absolutely. The task force was very clear in relation to that. She went on to say it's a growth area in the cannabis marketplace. Obviously, if you're concerned about public health, you want to move people away from smoking product into enjoying their cannabis. If it's for medicinal purposes, there are therapies in non-smoking forms. As we've mentioned and is mentioned in the task force report, the edible market is growing, it is varied. We also know that there's a demand. If you want to move from the illicit market into a regulated legal market, then you have to offer the quality and choice that the illicit market provides. It's fair to say that we heard that over and over again from a wide variety of people we talked to. There are public health reasons and public safety reasons why you would want to authorize or allow edibles in various forms. We have discovered that the forms in which they come are only limited by one's imagination. I'm not going to belabor the point because I believe my Liberal colleagues have come to the same conclusion as I have, that if we really want to get out of the illicit market, if we really want to have safe, regulated products for Canadians to buy, then we will move to edibles. I guess our only point of departure right now is whether we do this with this legislation, which the NDP suggests, or if we wait some time, which, as the Liberal side has suggested, they believe is the better way to go. With respect, I'm going to suggest that we adopt this motion and put it in this bill. This bill will only be passed on July 1, 2018. That's about 10 months from now. The regulations of edibles will be promulgated by regulation. There's a lot of time for the ministry to get those regulations in place in a proper way by July 1. Again, I don't think there's any compelling reason I've heard that would warrant waiting beyond that. I respect the Conservative position that they don't believe perhaps that the product should be legally available at all. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but if we're making the decision, as the Liberals and New Democrats believe we should, to include edibles, then all the rationale and evidence points to doing that now, and none of it points to waiting. There's only harm in waiting. I want to conclude just by making a couple comments in respect to Mr. Van Kester's remarks, and that is the social impacts of cannabis use that he pointed out that are real, impaired driving, perhaps the impact on employees under the influence of cannabis in the workplace, are legitimate. But with great respect, we can't talk as if that's not happening now. It's happening now. The only question is what we've done up to now is we've criminalized that behavior. And all the evidence that I've heard is that criminalizing that behavior doesn't do anything to help address the problem. In fact, all it does is it adds the extra stigmatization and harms that come from criminalizing behavior that is ultimately probably a health matter. It's my view that this matter, legalizing cannabis, is long overdue. I congratulate the government for coming forward with this legislation. It may not be perfect, but it's an important step. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Oliver, for his kind words. And I want to just point out that there is an upcoming referendum called the federal election 2019, and if the Conservatives believe that criminalizing cannabis is the way to go, then I hope they campaign on recriminalizing cannabis, and we'll see if the majority of Canadians agree with them.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gladue.
I just wanted to bring to the attention of the member that talked about the products that are made with cannabis that have medical benefit, topical creams, things that people are using that are anti-inflammatories. These things could be added to the medicinal marijuana roster that we have today, which is an extremely well controlled and very safe for public consumption because of the quality control and testing that's in place. So I just wanted to put that into the record.
Mr. Ayub.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to echo what Mr. Davis has said with respect to edibles containing marijuana. Indeed, the goal of our government, as he has guessed, is to do things step by step in an orderly fashion. We do want in the next to deal with edibles in the 12 months following the implementation of this legislation. I certainly appreciate his will, his goodwill, and his determination. I respect that. And I see as we near the end, I would like to thank my Conservative colleagues as well for their point of view. We may not share their point of view, but we have had a good debate, and we will move and continue to move to improve circumstances for Canadians. I would finish by quite simply saying with respect to Mr. Van Kersten, I can't prevent myself from saying, since when has China become a model for the Conservatives? Well, that's the only point that I wanted to make with respect to that. We have done excellent work in our committee. Our committee has provided an example of excellent work and rigor. We will move this matter along no matter what direction it takes.
On NDP 37, I think we should have a recorded vote on this.
Yeah, I just want to have one more comment.
I'm sure you did.
Thank you. Well, I just want to comment. I think it wouldn't be fair to the totality of the evidence we heard, and I think the views of millions of Canadians, if we left without expressing that, cannabis is not just it's not a substance that is dangerous and harmful to your health, although it has impacts and it has potential impacts in that way. Millions of Canadians view cannabis and use it as a substance that, when used properly and responsibly, is, as Dr. Neil Boyd said, provides pleasure and helps control pain. And millions of Canadians view cannabis in that regard. They do not view it as a substance that is going to lead to the crashing of civilization in Canada as we know it. They view it as a substance that, just as with alcohol and liquor, is a substance that is used as adults to enhance their experience of life. And I think that we may not all share that view, but millions of Canadians do. And I think it wouldn't do justice to this subject without ending with some comment that millions of Canadians do not view this as a substance that is damaging to their lives or their health when used properly and responsibly. So I just wanted to go on the record to say that.
I just wanted to say that it's exactly these kinds of statements that put into the minds of our young people that cannabis is not harmful, when clearly the evidence says it is harmful. It is harmful to them. We also heard testimony from doctors that treat addiction in those that are older. So there are harmful effects of the drug itself. There are also the unintended consequences of the increase in impaired drug driving and those that get a hold of it that were not intended to get a hold of it. So I wouldn't want to let the record show that. That said, I did also want to say that this has been a most cordial conversation, although that we are not in favor of legalization. We do support ticketed offenses for possession and that sort of thing. And I did try to participate and engage and provide many recommendations as we went along. I think there was no surprise about the things that I found flawed in the bill. So thanks for the conversation.
Thank you very much. Now we go to the vote on NDP 37, and we're going to have a recorded vote.
Monsieur Ayoub, Mr. Yolson, Mr. McKinnon, Mr. Oliver, Ms. Sidhu, Ms. Cladu, Mr. Van Kesteren, Mr. Weber, Mr. Davies. Yes. Yes pour 1, nays contre 8.
I declare NDP 37 defeated. So shall Schedule 4 carry? All in favor? All opposed? Schedule 4 is carried.